This is Athletes as Educators with former pro basketball player, championship winning coach, and author Angela R. Lewis. Angie Lewis interviews current and former athletes who are passionate about sharing the lessons they've learned and the experiences that have shaped their lives. A resource for parents, a guide for student athletes, a source for current and former athletes, keys to transition off the court. Welcome to the Athletes as Educators podcast with Angela R. Lewis.
Welcome to this episode of Athletes as Educators. I'm your host, Angie Lewis. On our podcast today, we have Terri Lakowski. She played college basketball at Washington University in St. Louis, worked for the Women's Sports Foundation, and now is the president and CEO of Active Policy Solutions. It's a consulting firm that provides government relations and advocacy support for clients specializing in sports and health and wellness, youth development, and civil rights policy. Terri, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Terri, we have had so many conversations. We used to play ball together back in the day. When did you first start playing ball, and how did you fall in love with the game?
My dad introduced me to basketball before I honestly have memories of that happening. I know that before I was in kindergarten, I started playing in leagues with him, and for me, it was first about connecting with my dad, and then I really became in love with basketball because it provided me a safe space when I was growing up. I was definitely your typical tomboy, and I'm sure you might have been a little bit too, my friend. And my sister was kind of the girly girl, and just basketball was the one place where I always felt like I belonged and I fit in, and I could do something really cool, and no one was going to judge me. And so I think growing up, it just became part of my identity, and that's really how I started falling in love with the game.
I was the same way, and the game did the same thing for me. It was this place where us tall girls could feel comfortable, and there were other people like us, and you could be competitive, and it wasn't frowned upon.
Absolutely.
When you were playing ball, what was your greatest challenge?
My greatest challenge was getting out of my own head and trying to just enjoy the moment and enjoy the game. I got to tell you, I probably failed on that front. I was just always so focused on getting better and getting to the next level and trying to improve and, what I was doing wrong, that I never just stopped to enjoy the moment. And I think I've missed a lot out of what could have been a much more enriching experience, just enjoying my teammates, enjoying the ride, because I was always just so focused on the next step. I forgot to see what was in front of me.
Quite often that happens to athletes, and we're told to move on to the next game. Like we definitely are not taught early on to embrace the moment. We're taught to move on past everything and always look forward. And although there's some value in that, you bring up a really good point about not enjoying the moment. What are some things that can be done to help athletes enjoy the process in addition to setting goals and reaching for them?
I think it's even just something so simple. Like I coach little kids, and I think we're taught, when you make a basket, right, you shouldn't be overly celebratory. It should be seen as common nature, right? Mm-hmm. But what gets lost by just not even being able to stop and pause and be happy that you made a basket? You know what I mean? It's like those little victories we're taught at an early age. Oh, no gloating, you're bragging, like, just get back on D. And I definitely agree, like, get back on defense, but just, stopping for that second and saying yes and giving a cheer. Like, I mean, that is something that is just, I think, so typical, and that's where it starts, is in the little things.
Yeah. Those little things make a really big difference, and they shape how we behave off the court as well. Obviously, you're a leader, owning your own company. How did you use what you've learned from playing sports into leadership position?
I think in basketball, especially when you're competitive, you're often put in situations where you don't know anybody. I mean, since I was in 8th grade, I was going to camps where I was, surrounded by complete strangers, and I was always the kid who would bring the shy ones together and, have to sit with me at lunch and just, make friends. And so I kind of developed a natural ability to talk to strangers and be able to engage. And I think, and listen to people. figure out, what people needed to be comfortable. And I think as a leader, that's one of the most important qualities you can have is the ability to listen and understand the needs of everyone around you. And I think I started that through basketball.
What are some other lessons that you've learned through playing sports that you use? So leadership for sure, bringing people together, being able to listen to them and help them work towards a common goal. Are there other things that are tangible or intangible that sports have taught you?
I mean, definitely hard work and resilience. I mean, unlike you, I had no natural talent. I was a slow kid. Like, I had to work and struggle for everything that I got. I mean, I know you worked your butt up, I'm teasing you. But, I think sports, really taught me just what's possible if you just work your butt off for it. Mm-hmm. And I did. And, so failure is not an option. It's just how many more shots do I need to take? How much more do I have to work to get where I need to go? And I had that same mentality in business when someone who I wanted to client tells me no. I don't hear no. I just hear how much longer it's going to take to get to a yes.
Right.
That's I think those are some lessons that I learned on the court. And, the most important one that I tell all my employees is shake it off and get back on defense. I mean, something bad happens, you don't have the ability in the workplace to cry over spilled milk, particularly if you're, at an event or doing something with a client. You just gotta shake it off and get back on D.
It's so funny because a lot of times athletes don't see how those skills that we've learned transfer. And so I think it's important that athletes who are listening get examples, right, of how you can use what you've learned on the court in your day-to-day. And as you know, there are a lot of athletes who are transitioning right now, like from playing professional to not playing professional or from college, who they've recently graduated. What's your advice for those people who are transitioning from being an athlete to the workforce?
I would say don't try to change your personality to fit the workplace. People love athletes.
Yeah.
There's nothing that puts someone at ease more than talking to them about sports. One of the first things I do when I'm on Capitol Hill is I go into the office because most of my clients are in the sports field, and I ask the person I'm talking to, did you play sports? And everyone has, and everyone's favorite subject is themselves, and they want to talk about it. And if you're an athlete, you have an instant credibility, you have an instant way to connect with people, and that's what people will remember. And so I think, a lot of times the athletes like trying to hide it or not being as forthcoming with what they've done, but it's like the greatest selling point they have. Plus your ability to be part of a team and take directions and work hard. I mean, those are incredible, valuable assets that you bring to the workplace, and I think those should be showcased.
You're absolutely right, Terri. Most people played sports at some point in their life, whether it was JV or summer league or something like that. And sports has this unique ability to connect people from all backgrounds and cultures. And so leveraging that is important.
And even if you haven't played, people are sports enthusiasts. So, I mean, there's some common connection. Even members of Congress who I speak to, they don't want to talk about the bill. They want to talk about sports. If you played, all the better, And they're not going to remember what you asked about, but they're going to remember, I like that guy. He was a really good basketball player. Let's hire him. That's how you get your foot in the door.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Will you talk about your career progression? So after college, after undergrad, you decided that you really wanted to work in Title IX and women's and providing opportunities.
Yeah, actually, it started a little early for me. So when I was in high school, I definitely felt like I got the short end of the stick as an athlete. My basketball team, we played in a small, quote-unquote, girls' gym. They had no air condition. Cheerleaders never came to our game. We never had the same kind of support and publicity as the boys. And I remember my parents, complaining and speaking with the athletic director and them pretty much ignoring us and just being so angry and feeling helpless. Like, why am I, being treated second class for the boys' basketball team just because I'm a girl? And when I was a sophomore in high school, I took a class in education law, and I first learned about Title IX. And I got angry. I was so upset when I found out there was this law out there that required schools to provide equal opportunities for women and men in sports. And no one told me. And my school was violating it. And so that summer, I went to the ACLU of Eastern Missouri and started a Title IX education and outreach project working with their attorneys. And as part of that effort, I actually went around to high schools and little leagues and parent groups in the St. Louis area, teaching parents and kids and coaches about their rights under Title IX. So that I wanted to make sure that the same thing that happened to me didn't happen to other student athletes where they had their rights violated and didn't even know they had a mechanism to stand up for themselves. So that's really what got me started. And as part of that, I was working with their ACLU lawyers, and we did some targeted compliance audits of high schools in the St. Louis area, trying to improve their Title IX compliance practices, starting with where I went to school. So I was like, hey, athletic director, remember me? Still listen to me then. Now I got some powerful friends. So that's when I really got a taste of social justice and social change and the power of advocacy to improve access for future women in sports.
So you were in high school, and you decided that this wasn't right. Like, you saw a problem. How did you get connected with the ACLU? How did you know to go to them?
Well, that was in college. I was mad as a high school student. When I was in college, I got connected to the ACLU through my career center at Washington University. I had really great career people, and they helped me figure out what would be a good place to go do Title IX work. And then what was also really neat is I was able to continue that through my junior and senior year by making it like a practicum and a student externship. I got full credit for continuing to work for them the rest of college.
Oh, got you. My correction. So you recognized the inequity when you were in high school, and you were still pissed off about it when you got to college and was like, hold on, now I can actually do something about this. And
yeah, I'm still mad. I hate it didn't go away.
Right, true. Very true. And then after undergrad, you began working with the Women's Sports Foundation. Will you talk a little bit about the organization and what they do and what your role was there?
Yeah, sure. So the Women's Sports Foundation is a national nonprofit dedicated to women and girls in sports. And so after working at the ACLU, I wanted to continue my advocacy on a national level, and they are the only ones who really do that. So I went there, and I actually started as an intern, working directly under the CEO in supporting their advocacy. So my job was to field calls from parents and kids and coaches around the country who were struggling every day with their Title IX issues, and I got to help them understand the law and come up with solutions and be an advocate in their local schools. And then I also started working to address policy on a broader level in Washington, D.C. in terms of advancing different legislation and things with the Department of Education that would actually improve how Title IX was being implemented.
What are some challenges that you face in this work? I mean, I would like to think that there's some people who really don't want to see you coming.
Yeah, honestly, I think the biggest challenge is that people think the fight is over. I think there's a general complacency, particularly with women, that, feminism, for one, is considered a dirty word. Yeah. And two, well, what are you complaining about? It's been 44 years. The 44th anniversary of Title IX was actually yesterday. And, it's hard for people to recognize because there is now a girls' soccer team and a girls' volleyball team. Like, well, what are you complaining about? And so, and a lot of the inequities now are less visible. It's not just about getting in the door. It's about how you're treated once you're there. It's about the softball facility not being as nice as the baseball facility. It's about the girls' basketball team still having to practice in the small gym while the boys have the big gym. It's those things, and I think when people think about civil rights violations and access, those aren't, immediately what come to mind. And so I think, frankly, more of my issue, obviously there's issues in working with the schools, but the more of the issue is within the community, you recognize that there still is a need for continued advocacy and change.
Terri, you bring up such great points. When I think back to college, we played in a smaller gym than the guys, and that's just how it was. There wasn't this,
right.
This battle for us to play in equal facilities, and that just became the norm. So it was the complacency that you talk about, the lack of advocacy that you mentioned, is rampant because that's just how things are. The girls play over here and the guys play over here. How do you respond to some of the athletic directors who may say, well, the women's team or the women's program isn't generating as much revenue, so why should we support them at the same level? How do you handle those discussions and conversations?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually one of the really common arguments. Mm-hmm. And, economics isn't an excuse for discrimination. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a reason why educational institutions are tax exempt. Sports are part of the athletic experience of schools. They're supposed to be treated as such. Out at the college level, it's become so corrupted that they're not. But, I mean, I always give the analogy of, you don't invest less in your minority students because you have a broader alumni base of white students. I mean, it's kind of like saying the same thing. Like, okay, in that instance, if you were to get the argument of, oh, we have more white donors, so we're not going to invest as much in our minority students, or support minority students, someone will be horrified, right? That's completely unacceptable. Right. But how is it any different with women and men? But that's oftentimes what is used as a justification.
It is. You're absolutely right. And I don't think anyone would say what you just said about minority and white donors blatantly, but the situation around women's sports and generating revenue is said quite often. Some of the young women who are now transitioning, and there are a number of women who are interested in law. What are some of the essential skills that you would say anyone interested in the legal field should have?
I mean, law is a lot like sports, the full contact sport. You can't be shy. You have to be aggressive, and you can't. You have to be willing to get back on defense. I mean, law is tough. You have to have resilience. You have to be willing to work hard. And I think all the things that make you a good athlete are going to make you a really good lawyer. Most important thing is not getting pushed around. Law is still very much an old boy club, and it's all a lot about who you know, not necessarily what you know. So I think that as women, it's often harder to network, and I think that's a really critical part of the job. A lot of decisions and a lot of hiring are made on the golf course in law. So I think those are pieces that are really important for women to understand and develop as well.
Lastly, Terri, before we close, I want to talk about you being an entrepreneur. I mean, you were working with the Women's Sports Foundation. You were loving the work, doing the advocacy work, and then something happened that you told me about. Will you talk a little bit about that and why you made the decision to continue this work with your own company?
Yeah, I lost my job. When the economy fell out, we had to close our advocacy division. The foundation lost a lot of money, so I lost my job. And I think, frankly, it was my training as an athlete that probably kept me sane. I mean, just kind of thought back to all the days where I've broken this bone, and you have to rehab, you have to rebuild, and you just come back. And so that's kind of what I did. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and realized that I wanted to continue doing what I had been doing and just need to find a way to do it. Mm-hmm. So I reached out proactively to my colleagues and relationships that I had and networked and identified some people who wanted to bring me on as a consultant. And, one consultancy led to two, led to three, and 7 years later, that's what I'm doing now.
That's so. I think there are a lot of athletes who have interest in entrepreneurship and want to be entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are. And it seems like that background of, like you said, getting back on defense and getting up when things don't work makes entrepreneurship a natural fit for a number of athletes. What are some things that there are athletes who are thinking about stepping out there? What should they know? What's some tips you have for them?
I think that, really, I mean, it's very rewarding, but it's also very challenging running your own business. And I think a lot of people say, I want to run my own business without really, one, identifying if there's a need and making sure they have a client base. For me, I was very fortunate. I was trying to figure out a job and got a bunch of clients, none of them could hire me full time, and then decided I might as well make a business out of it. So for me, the clients came first, and I grew a business from there. And I actually think, although I did it by accident, it was probably one of the best things I could have done, because I know a lot of people who do it the other way, and if you can't build that client base, it's really hard to provide a stable level of income. And it's relationships. And I think, tapping into your network of other athletes. I mean, there's so many people that you know through sports who are this is the power, know other people. I mean, that's a really great network that you can use when you're building a business and trying to cultivate relationships. So I think that's a really important tool. The other piece is, not being afraid to kind of take risks, which I think something you do in sports, right? You're not afraid to take that last shot. And, when you're out on your own, running a business, you got to be able to take risks. And the first couple of years are tough, but it's that mentality of, it's like a rebuilding season, after you graduate all your seniors. You're going to get your butt kicked for a little while. And that's okay. That's just part of the deal. And I think you have to understand that, your first season after you graduate, you're, big champs, you're going to get your butt kicked, but you're rebuilding, and, 3 or 4 years down the road, you're going to be fine. And just having that longer-term vision when you're an entrepreneur is also very important.
Yeah. Terri, there is no question that you're passionate about the work that you do, about your company, about the advocacy for youth and women. What keeps you motivated and pushing forward?
Yeah, I don't want to see the same mistakes happen to other women that happen to me, both in terms of, not having access or opportunities when they should, and also just not enjoying the sport and the fun of the game in the way that I think I could have. So that's what motivates me is kind of trying to right the wrongs that I did to myself and were done to me when I was growing up.
Terri, thank you for your work. Thank you for being on this podcast. I know there are some young women who will definitely benefit greatly from the work that you're doing. It's pretty amazing to be able to look back and say, I'm going to help my younger self. It's a really, really powerful place to be, to know that the work that you're doing is going to make a difference for someone who is where you used to be. So if people want to find out more about you, your company, if they want to get involved, how can they reach you?
They can go to my website, activepolicysolutions.com, and my information and contact info is all there. I also have a lot of really great resources on Title IX and sports access as well.
Perfect. ActivePolicySolutions.com. Find out more information about Terri Lakowski and her business, and reach out and learn about Title IX so that we can make sure that more young women have opportunities and access to resources. Thank you so much, Terri. Cannot wait to see you this fall.
Thank you.
This is Athletes as Educators.
Thank you for listening to the Athletes as Educators podcast. Connect with me through the Athletes as Educators Facebook page or at Athletes Educate on Instagram. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and go over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. For more resources and information about today's podcast, you can check us out at AngelaRLewis.com.